I'm so glad, first of all, that we're finally doing this.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled too. I know it's been a while.
So let's start off with why we're here. Why is America's best known banker in an inner city, low income neighborhood in Baltimore?
Yeah. I think it's a kind of a microcosm of what banks do, which is to lift up society. So most people think of us as an investment bank and a private bank and commercial bank, and we do all those things. But we also bank, 25% of our branches in lower income neighborhoods, and we want to lift them up too. And so this branch here is we're new to Maryland, so we're now in 48 states. 30% of the branches here are in lower income neighborhoods. They're in communities. We work with local government folks, local not-for-profits. You saw the mayor, the governor-elect. What do they need? And we call it a community branch. It means the community manager gets to know all of the local folks, the churches, the schools, the businesses, and we invite people in for education about mortgages, wealth, starting a business, et cetera. We use local vendors for food to build the place. We hire locally, so there are paychecks going out in the local neighborhood, and you can see the spirit of the people. I mean, it's very uplifting, and so it's just part of what we do. And then we come into town, we bring everything else too. Government for not-for-profit banking, we bank cities, schools, states, hospitals. So it's just a wonderful way to help lift up communities. And it's extremely critical for America to focus on helping the underprivileged. I think it's a mistake to just drive by and say that's not our problem. Mm-hmm. And so you see a lot of companies doing it. I'm proud of all the people that do it. And it's good for business. I mean, if you lift up society, it helps everybody.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, because you've done this now in Detroit, you've done this here, you've done it in parts of Dallas. You're not a charity. You're doing this for profit.
Yeah. So people look at that. There's a little piece of charitable money, which sometimes I call an accelerator. Mm-hmm. So if you can put that little piece of charity in, on top of that, you can build $100 million of loans. But it's not done for charity. It's got to be sustainable. Things which aren't sustainable don't work very well. And so, but once we've got collaboration with local government, no, we're here. We intend to make a profit here and open accounts here and do things like that. And like I said, if you lift up Baltimore, it lifts up every business here. It lifts up all the people. You have more jobs, more wages, better social outcomes, better real estate value. So it's critical we do it, and it's very good for business in the long run. And if everyone did it, it'll be very good for all of America.
If everybody did
if
this.
Everyone. And a lot
Bank of
companies,
America's across the street over there. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm not going to mention any competitors, but this is a much nicer looking branch.
Well, but just fundamentally, when you lend money, both parties are at risk. So in coming in here, JPMorgan has to change some of the parameters because you're reaching people who are unbanked.
Yes.
How do you know if someone is creditworthy, if they've never owned a home, they've never had a bank account? How do you know you're making a good bet?
It's a great question. So when you're here and you ask and you know the neighborhoods and you work with government, you do multiple things. So we do special things. We call it special credit. I won't go through the legal parameters, but you can use other facts that are not used in traditional underwriting. Like, have you paid rent for 10 years? So you and I would both say if there is a mother or father or family paying rent for 10 years, that's a good credit sign. So we take a little bit of a stretch on that. Mm-hmm. And so we live and learn, and so you can use a lot of data to do that. The government here realized when it comes to lifting up neighborhoods, you can't have a block where 50 homes, 50 townhouses are bad or destroyed and 50 are occupied. You have to lift all of them up. So the government here came up with a very special program to put in the seed money to rehab the whole block. Once they rehab the whole block, we can step in and start making mortgages so people can buy the homes and live there. Mm-hmm. And so there are multiple paths to do it. On the Entrepreneur of Color Fund that we do with small businesses, we give them an advisor too. That gives us great comfort that they're doing the right things.
So you've been critical in the past, though, of government-backed lenders like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for their role in the last crisis and loosening up the ability to take loans. This was all, at that time, well-intended to boost home ownership.
Yes.
So you can have a good intention and things can go wrong.
You're absolutely correct. Things done badly are bad. And so there are a lot of examples where lenders did the wrong thing, and in the case banks and stuff like that. But we test, we learn, and so these are not government programs. These are programs that we do that we're pretty comfortable doing a good thing. Do we take extra risk? Yes. But that's part of our job. We bank venture capital companies, we bank startups, we bank a lot of people. Mm-hmm. We're adults. We're big boys. We know that their credit cycles, things go up or down. So we're not taking so much risk that it's going to sink a company. Remember, Fannie and Freddie went bankrupt. The government paid, hundreds of billions of dollars on that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing there, by the way, is some of the underwriting was hidden. people didn't actually know what people were doing on the underwriting, which is not the case here.
So the overall intent of boosting home ownership, you believe, is really important.
Yes.
But in this moment we're in right now, you have mortgage rates, about 7%?
6.5%, yeah.
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah.
It's hard to get access, but the Fed's also trying to cool off a housing market bubble.
Yeah.
So
Another good
why
question.
try to encourage?
We look right through that. So this is we're not doing this and pulling in or pulling out our horns because the markets are good or bad. This is, you get to a community, you start doing it. So obviously we're probably making less mortgages now because of higher rates, but we're in the community, we're gonna have loan officers in the community, we're gonna learn more about the community, and we will look past the actual rates. And remember, the important thing about mortgages, and this is why I do criticize some public policy sometimes, mortgages are how most Americans got their net worth.
Right.
And if you can't get a smaller mortgage to buy a house, it's hard to build your net worth. Mortgages are also, by the way, how often people funded their small business startup. So it is absolutely critical. And one of the things that we've been trying to change a little bit is because of all excessive rules now, and I'm not talking about things that would make risk worse, about origination, servicing, securitization, the cost of a small mortgage is probably 50 basis points higher than it should be. So that $150,000 mortgage or $200,000 mortgage is less affordable by a lot of people. And that's because of regulatory policy. That's not because of bank policy. And so, I think there are things that can be done that can make mortgages far more affordable.
Well, but you're saying not at this moment. You're not necessarily.
No, let's change that right now. Yeah.
Bigger picture on this effort right now. You said it's important to be trying to do things to address and build up communities. So if you're trying to combat discrimination, boost racial equity, that's admirable. But the other side of the coin is, a critic would say, a big bad Wall Street bank is loading debt onto poor people. How do you respond to that?
Because that's a fairly ignorant person.
Well, you just spent a lot of time in Washington. I'm sure you have heard a lot of criticism of big bad banks.
Well, that's a different issue. We're not trying to load debt on anyone. And yes, I hear about big bad banks, but we're here, we're doing jobs, we want to make good mortgages, we want to do good small business loans, we want to educate people on how to open an account, how to save money. We've got products that are special for lower income communities and stuff like that. We are going to do that. It is good for this community. If this community does better, it's good for this community. It doesn't hurt any other community. In fact, it helps them.
But how do you reassure folks who say the lender shouldn't be the educator?
Well, we're educating them how to save money.
That's what those classes are about?
Yeah, how to save money, how to buy a home, how to manage a business if you start a business, how to get how to sign a lease, how to negotiate a government contract. So a lot of it's education. It's not lending money. So and the specific account we have is an account where you get a debit card, checking account, all the services, ATM services, branch services, can't overdraft. So
you can't overdraft.
No, if you buy this account, it does not allow an overdraft. So we have a lot of products and services. We live and learn, and I don't worry about naysayers all the time. We have a true north. We know what we're doing. We lift up societies around the world. We do it from low income to high income. We bank governments. We bank the IMF. We bank the World Bank. We bank middle market companies. We bank small businesses. We're in lower income neighborhoods, and we want to help. We want to do it all well, and we've done it all well. We're quite comfortable with all the things we do, and that they're also good for shareholders in the long run.
So you've been doing this particular program since roughly 2020. You put about $18 billion into it. Do you want to expand it?
Yeah. So we've been doing programs like this for a long time. The biggest lesson was when we did this huge effort in Detroit. So Detroit is one of the major American cities that had not had a renaissance. They ended up with a fabulous mayor, Mayor Duggan. We worked with him. We did an extended, almost in the 10th year anniversary, $250 million. I won't repeat all the same things, a lot of the similar things here, but working with local not-for-profits, local institutions, the local government, and it works. You can turn a city, you can make it work better. You can, if you go into downtown Detroit and look at it today versus what it was 15 years ago, and you can see the powerful effort. That kind of informed us that, we could do this in other places in different ways. And so we're always learning, but we now have doing something like this in 15 cities.
Do those states, do those governors and mayors come to you, or are you still?
Sometimes, but we obviously talk to a lot of them. But I think you heard, Peter Scheer talk about that the collaboration is what makes it. We're not asking for gifts from cities or states or anything like that, but we also need their help. Like I gave you that very specific example about affordable housing here. Yes. So that the rules and laws are different in Michigan, or they're different in other places. So if you've got people working together, it works. if the local government doesn't like business and turns askance and doesn't thinks we're bad and stuff like that. No, it's hard to want to do business there, and they're making a mistake. What they should do is go to Detroit, come here, visit a branch, see what policy works and what policy doesn't work.
So in cities across the country right now, there's a homelessness problem.
Yeah.
And some of it is linked to many issues, but one of them is just accessible and affordable housing.
Yeah.
What incentive do you see for a developer right now to go in and try to take a loan and build up that kind of housing? Like, what is preventing that?
We are one of the biggest affordable lending in the country, and a lot of other banks do a lot of great job with that too. It is, first of all, it's very local. It could be zoning laws, it could be requirements, it could be building requirements, it could be local construction, it could be a million different things, but we often provide either the equity or the debt or the mezzanine to build affordable housing. We do it everywhere. So I can give you, I would have to send you a big position paper, which is different by every state. It is a big deal. It can be done, but you really need to have competent affordable housing policies.
And that comes down, as you're saying, to these community relationships that you have to try to
and
solve
community
for that.
laws. There are community laws, there are city laws, there are federal laws, there are a lot of this legal stuff.
I mean, you've been in Washington for a few days. Have you talked about this with lawmakers? I mean, at the
I've talked about the
national
mortgage
level.
thing. Oh, I've talked about a lot of these things all the time. I go to Washington all the time. Because
But the acute homelessness
But here's
program.
no. That's hard for us to do. We do affordable housing.
Yeah.
And again, all those other issues are so local, you got to really get into the local level. So our people get involved in that, and we get involved in the federal policies. But I think one really important thing, this is a microcosm of what a bank does. And and then other businesses, you heard about other businesses coming to lower income neighborhoods and what they're doing. But the most important thing is also government federal policy around infrastructure, education, taxation, regulation, healthcare. So we got to attack these problems from both sides. Good public policy at the federal level, good public policy at the state level, and then people like us doing our job, that we were meant to do: finance, grow, develop people's dreams, help them accomplish their goals.
Big picture, because you've lived through a lot of crisis in this country, and just looking back, you were at the helm during the financial crisis and the Great Recession, sovereign debt crisis, the pandemic. This moment we are in feels like a transition point, an inflection point, and I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
Yeah, I think it's very important people understand America is the most prosperous nation the world's ever seen. Our basic principles of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, are unbelievable. The innovation is unparalleled anywhere around the world. So start with that. It's an amazing position of strength. The economy is going through a bunch of things. You just mentioned them, COVID and stuff like that. And we don't always really know whether you have a mild recession or hard recession. And if it happens, we're going to be fine. I feel terrible for people who lose jobs. We want to keep it as short as possible. I do think you're right about a turning point. But that turning point is about geopolitics. That's about Ukraine, oil, Russia, war, migration, food, national security, China, trade, that whole bucket of things. And I'd put in that category quantitative tightening, which is basically reducing liquidity in the banking system of the world. That is actually, forget us for a second, it can be very difficult, high dollar, the dollar going up, higher rates, and quantitative tightening on smaller countries around the world.
The World Bank and the IMF have been warning about this for a while.
And so I'm saying you got to put that whole mix in what's happening in geopolitics. I would say that that's critical. And Ukraine is a turning point. Ukraine is a turning point where maybe all this illusion that we had that somehow the world's at peace and everything's going to be fine, that should have been shattered. And therefore we should be thinking about how can America do great in the next 100 years? What policies should we have? Obviously, it's a change in, I hold our military in the highest regard, but what they accomplish around the world is extraordinary. But what do we need? And part of it's just having a very strong economy, which helps pay for all this, and it has to be done with our allies. Otherwise, you're not going to end up with the world that we really want.
When I looked at your last shareholder letter, which I know you take a direct role in writing.
I write every word.
Well, that was April.
I get help, but I write every word.
Everyone goes through a process in thinking through these things. And when you ranked some of the things worrying you, Ukraine was right up there with all the domestic issues. That was right after the war started.
Yeah.
Now we're at a point where some would look and say, okay, it wasn't the worst case scenario in Europe in terms of severe recession. They're finding ways to get oil and gas elsewhere. Do you think in the same way now as you did then in terms of
I think
risk?
even more so.
Really?
That's a false sense of security that you've had this war going on for 9 months or whatever, and that somehow it's okay. Oil prices went way up. Europe's going to a recession. Migration has been extraordinary. You haven't seen the full effect of food prices around the world. If you go to Europe, they're taking this much more seriously than Americans are. They're on the front line. You have those missiles going to Poland. You have basically nuclear blackmail. I mean, it is as serious as you can get. So we should all hope it goes away, that there's some kind of armistice or settlement. That's good for Ukraine, by the way.
Right.
But this is the Western world under attack. I mean, this is to take anything like that. And wars, if you read the history of wars, they don't end the way people think they would when they started.
No.
So that's like every war. And so the danger of this war is extraordinary. And it can go on for years. But this oil and gas thing, it looks like the Europeans will get through it this winter. But this oil and gas problem is going to go on for years. So if I was in the government or anywhere else, I'd say I have to prepare for getting much worse. I hope it doesn't, but I would definitely be preparing for it to get much worse.
What does that look like to you in terms of what should be prepared for on the energy front?
Well, it's multiple things. But on the energy front, we need secure, reliable, cheap oil and gas. The problem, a lot of people think that oil and gas prices being high is good for CO2. It's not. So cheap, reliable. You're looking at Germany. I mean, the Europeans are terrified. Their energy prices are 2, 3, 4, 5 times ours, which is hurting consumers, which the governments have to do something about, and it's hurting businesses. And it's just started. And so the pain and suffering couldn't get a lot worse. So, it has the benefit, lower prices have the benefit of having more production, okay? They have the benefit of helping poor nations, lower income individuals, our allies who are desperate for more secure energy, and CO2, because quite predictably, carbon emissions, because quite predictably, carbon emissions are going up because nations rich and poor around the world are turning back on their coal plants. They cannot afford expensive energy, and they can't afford no energy. So, to me, to solve climate, we kind of need all the above: permitting, plans. Gas is the best and cleanest way to reduce coal, which is the best way to reduce CO2. So, really thoughtful policy, comprehensive policy will get us there. But it also is military policy, economic policy, including trade. So when I say economic, I'm talking about, trade is one thing, but economic is investment rights. So anything that relates to national security will have to be changed. Like you know about semiconductors and rare earths. And
I want to ask you all about that, yeah.
Okay, and so that'll all, if you're going to ask me later, I'll wait, but those are all things that have to be fixed.
Well, let's button up on on energy, though, because, President Biden has called it Putin's price spike, but he's also blamed price inflation on corporate profits.
Yeah.
And I know this irritates you.
Yeah.
You've argued energy costs are not high because of price gouging, but because of the dramatic decline in investments in energy, which results in reduced supply when demand goes up. So if that's true, what is it going to take to increase lending to companies so they can make those investments?
Yeah.
Is that the choke
This
point?
is a little more complicated now because part of it is the companies don't want to do it.
Why?
Well, part of it, when people talk about excise profit tax, that's one. They can't get permits done. They can't get leasing and stuff like that. And part of it is their investors are putting a lot of pressure on them.
To go green.
To go green, but not to invest too much capital where you're not making a profit with oil at a high price. It's not enough like that. And so it is that. So and think of it, it's a global problem. America produces 10 million barrels a day. The world consumes 100 million. And the other thing which you have to remember about oil, which is really important, that it goes up and down for a million different reasons. And people tend to look at one reason and say that's it. But right now, it's come down considerably, mostly because China's slowed down and Europe's going to recession. And that people think there might be a world recession, so the future price of oil is going down. Those things will reverse. And this underinvestment in oil and gas, it will hurt you 2 or 3 years out. That's quite predictable, but it's not today. And so we have time. I'm hoping the administration, they're looking at all these issues. I've spoken to John Podesta, who now runs the IRA Act, about what we can do to accelerate, reduce CO2, but have better, cheaper, more secure energy, not just for us, but for our particular allies around the world.
So America's set for record oil production in 2023, but it's like the refinery capacity, turning it into something usable, where that's kind of a choke point. So is the administration making it difficult for that specific kind of investment?
I think you'd have to talk to the oil folks about that.
Okay.
Look, this world is really complex. I mean, if you don't have the pipelines, you can't do the refinery. If you can't have this, you can't do that. If you don't have the charging stations, you can't do this. If you build EV cars, but it's still coal-powered electricity, you're not accomplishing CO2. So I just think we need to really look at this in detail, and hopefully there are a lot of smart people working on it. I think it's important. We're spending a lot of time on it because how critical energy is to the world. And remember, it's 40% of food prices too. So this is not a simple matter, and it's for food prices, a question of starvation.
Right.
This isn't a question of how far you can drive your car, how much your gas costs. So I put this whole. I think we need. I call it a Marshall Plan for energy. And that's got to be all the above and all the people involved.
But the IRA you referred to, the Inflation Reduction Act, that's just a sliver of what you're imagining for a Marshall Plan.
Yeah, no, and that is a huge. I mean, we're still studying every piece of it for renewables and EVs and a lot of different things. But it's not just that. It's the infrastructure we're building. It's competition around the world. It's access to rare earths. I mean, when you dig into it, it's a really complex thing.
Those are the ingredients needed for electric vehicles
exactly.
that China has a monopoly on right now, essentially.
They have a monopoly in production, not on where it is. So we have rare earths in America.
Right.
Whether we can produce them here or not, because of certain laws and requirements, that's a different issue. We need to build grids. We don't get permissions to permits to build grids. So, one of the deals that was done between the president and Joe Manchin was the permitting bill. That permitting bill is for pipelines. We need to get gas to Louisiana, to get that Louisiana gas to Europe, to help our allies and reduce the cost there. That also reduces their coal usage. So it's very green if you look at it on the margin. And so it gets very complicated, and we just need to do the work.
How would you, I remember covering the financial crisis and all this, and the frustration between Wall Street and Washington that they just kind of spoke past each other all the time. Where do you put that conversation now? Are people hearing what you're trying to explain in terms of market dynamics and investment?
Yeah. So I think it's sometimes justifiable when people talking across each other because damage was done. Damage was done in the financial crisis. Not all the big banks would have failed, and not everyone was equally guilty and all that. But and then of course people have simple political slogans that get them elected or something. But I think there's a lot of talk. We talk all the time to the Biden administration at multiple levels. And we should. I'm going to help any president try to do the best job for America, and those conversations are pretty intense. So Peter talks to them, I talk to them. They come to the BRT, which you saw a part of, and so it's very important we do it. And you're not always going to get your way, and there's going to be disagreement, but that's okay too.
Yeah, and I know you speak plainly, which you are known for doing. I want to ask you about China. It looks like they are loosening some of their COVID restrictions, maybe moving away from COVID zero. How do you see this impacting in the long and short term?
So I have my own view, and again, they kind of have to do that. You see the political unrest, and you also see the damage doing their economy. So they announced like yesterday 10 different things. I just read them quick this morning. They sound good to me. I think they want to get their economy going again. And that's a function of capital, COVID laws, trade, and things like that. And they've just started to have real conversations, or they said they're going to with the Biden administration. The most important thing about China and America is that we actually talk, that we actually get engaged at a detailed level about where we agree, where we disagree, and try to resolve these things. Then also work on some of the things we got to do together. Climate, terrorism, nuclear proliferation, bioterrorism. That's in all of our interest to fix those problems, and you can't do it without America and China.
Because it's not just the second largest economy in the world. Our countries are incredibly intertwined.
They're incredibly intertwined. But what you really need is American leadership to do this and to bring our allies in. If we do it just bilaterally, it will not work. Because the Chinese will go negotiate separate, better deals with God knows how many different countries. So we need to do it kind of in combination with allies.
So the U.S. and China are in direct competition, and the chances of conflict are rising on the national security front. Former Goldman Sachs CEO and Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, I know you know him, has warned the two economies are just too intertwined to separate at this point. How do you think about that and the increased conversation about trying to find separate supply chains and weaning ourselves off of cheap Chinese manufacturing?
Yeah. So number one, I'm a patriot, and national security is paramount. Absolutely national security, American national security. I'm going to leave Taiwan aside. I'll leave that to the experts and that kind of thing. And the most important thing for the American public, we have the most prosperous economy the world's ever seen. If we open our doors to people, billions of people come here. We have the best innovation. We've got food, water, and energy. We're in extraordinary good shape, and we shouldn't be shy about that or afraid or panicked or anything like that. What we need is tough negotiations. And you've already mentioned, so national security, that's going to be about semiconductors, rare earths, penicillins, that's unilateral. The Chinese do that, we do it. Most businesses support it. That gets very complicated when you talk about export controls and investment controls. But basically, the government's working with people like us and a lot of other companies about how do you implement something like that that is good for national security, but doesn't diminish American business doing well overseas.
Exactly.
Because it could do that, and again, it gets very specific. The other two trade things are not as important. Okay, one is every company wants to have a reliable, secure line, supply chain. Some people are already moving their stuff. You can move some stuff to Mexico, you can move it to India, et cetera. So that's already taking place. And the third one is what I call is how we all look at competition, unfair competition, state-controlled competition. And again, that also needs to be done with allies because, I was just all around Latin America. And they basically say to me, hey, we actually love America, but China's here with money, technology,
right.
They're making it cheaper. And what's my alternative? America's got to have alternatives. Some of that alternative will be that we need better development finance, better diplomacy. We need better rules around how banks or companies can go down and invest in foreign countries to do things that make sense. So it's comprehensive. The government's fully aware of it. It's doable. It's going to take work and take time.
But you're just saying the State Department and those other sort of softer bits of diplomacy need to be beefed up.
Immediately. Immediately. And diplomacy, I say development finance.
Right.
Because if the Chinese are going to go there and build a bridge or build a plant or buy the lithium mine, and you're going to have American companies who could, but don't for a whole bunch of different reasons, you should ask the question why. And I don't want to go through all the different reasons, but there are reasons American companies don't go to certain countries, and so it can all be done. And I think we're rolling up our sleeves. It should never have gotten this far. It did. I don't want to cry with spilled milk, but and the other thing people should remember is America could do a lot of things unilaterally.
Like
if we don't think they're being fair on X, they think of it as trade. If I can't sell there, you can't sell here. If I can't invest in 100% of company there, you can invest in 100% there. It's like reciprocal behavior.
Should this tariff stay on?
Look, I think it was the right thing to focus on China years ago. I think that was the wrong way to go about it. But they're not going to come down until it's negotiated as part of something else.
Don't give up the
There
leverage.
may be areas which should come down right away just to help certain producers and certain consumers.
You referenced some of the domestic
But we have to go back to like TPP. We have to stop thinking about trade.
free trade within Asia.
Negotiated trade. I mean, obviously we shouldn't sign the deal if it's not in the interest of the United States of America. But think of it, people.
But no one's going back to TPP.
No, but we're making a mistake.
It's politically toxic.
I know, but I don't know what that means because we have a trade policy with Asia. It's functioning today. Make it better. The notion that says we're not going to have a trade deal is a mistake because we have one today. That one would have been better. And we just got to change how we, and it's also strategic, in this case, it's also geopolitically strategic. Think of realpolitik here. This would have been better. An American Asia trading system that is set up the right way, that we think has the right rules, requirements, laws, governance, et cetera. And then China could be invited in. It's not against China.
Well, when you talk about, and you reference their investment in semiconductors here, electric vehicles, that kind of thing, that's part of the Biden administration's domestic economic revitalization, but it is national security policy as well.
Yeah, it's a little of both. We kind of mix them up, mix and match them a little bit. Yeah.
Exactly. But there are some critics who say that that's causing a little bit of market distortion there.
It does. I think, look, this stuff gets complicated, and remember, it gets written by Congress, and so the body is pretty good, but it has really irritated the Europeans. Because it's buy America, build America. It's a huge disadvantage for a part of the world we need really very good relations with. When people complain, the first thing you should always do is say, where are they right? And they're right about some of it, not all of it. And the president did say we can tweak it and modify it. And
the electric vehicles.
And I think that could be done.
Yeah.
But here's the really important part of this. It's not just that. If Europe goes its own way in trade, and they said they're going to do their own IRA bill, be their own trade bloc, buy America, buy Europe, build Europe, that is very bad for the global negotiators of trade. That is very bad for national security. That is very bad for the next century of America. And that's why I think this is it doesn't sound like it is, but it's absolutely critical for national security we get this one right.
I'm not at all disagreeing with you. I want to ask you, though, about the way foreign policy is exercised right now with Russia, for example. It was financial warfare first.
Yeah.
That's the direct hit the United States is taking on Russia. And I wonder how you think that was handled.
I thought it was handled extremely well, actually. I think there have been occasions where we overdid our financial sanctions and using it, because you don't want people to say, I don't want to do business with American banks or American entities or stuff like that. It has been a little misused, but there are times it's properly used. So here is both the Europeans and the American authorities, the Treasury Department here, who said this is a way to part of our big geopolitical war helping Ukraine. And they were right. And it was both sanctions and export controls and things like that. And I think they did it the right way. There's constant communication. I mean, if I say I mean like every day about how you effectuate these things and which ones work and which ones don't work and how SWIFT is going to work and all these various things. But it's been quite good. I think they were very much right to do it in this case.
But you couldn't do this with China, could you? Because the economies are too intertwined.
You couldn't, well, if you had to, you could, but that's a whole, the economic effect in China and the world would be dramatically worse. No one would benefit from that. And by whatever it is, it'd probably be worse for China than for us. Because like I said, we have all the food, water, and energy we need. We have peace in North America here. China, the American public may not know, China imports 11 million barrels of oil a day. They're not sitting there saying how comfortable they are. They're sitting there saying how vulnerable they might be. So you gotta, if you're gonna look at China, look at the whole thing. Take a deep breath and figure out what's in our interest and then go negotiate. And like I said, a lot of it could be done unilaterally. It has to be done multilaterally, like with their allies.
You had said in this country you were happy about the midterm results. I mean, the old adage was like gridlock is good for Wall Street.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about very large challenges to the country that are left unaddressed, that seems to be a risk.
Yeah, I didn't say anything about gridlock.
No, I'm saying that.
Okay, I thought it was.
Isn't that what we're going to get with a split
I thought
Congress?
the election was good because on both parties, the wingnuts didn't get elected. And so the rational thing, when I was just in Congress, I was gratified by the thought they want to make progress, and I think they can make progress. There are a lot of examples in history, under George W. Bush, Obama, Clinton, where when you had divided Congress, they actually got a lot of good things done.
But you've got really thin margins.
I would prefer to see collaboration and getting good stuff done. And so I think
you're staying optimistic about that.
I think there's a good chance they will get some good things done.
So we're days away from this government funding deadline. And Congress is going to have to pass a bill to avoid a shutdown. As a risk manager, where do you put the risk level here?
Well, the funding is different than the debt ceiling.
I know.
Okay. So,
but the risk is once power shifts come January that it could become
I would say government
problem.
funding, look, it's not the way to
Could
run
be used as
It's not the way to run a railroad. I mean, basically you end up spending much more money too, because the American public may not know, you pay people and then you pay them more to come back to work. It costs us much more money. So even if you want to be fiscally responsible, it's not a good idea. The debt ceiling is, you're talking about June of next year, and we'll deal with that later.
Right. Well, there's some debate about whether it should be done now in these last few weeks while Democrats still have control to avoid that kind of showdown.
They should, because the catastrophic effects of an actual default, not the debates, I understand both sides, how they want to use it, that's catastrophic, or potentially catastrophic. I would never take that risk. So for me, yes, I'd get it done now. Take it off the table.
So you said back in 2019 on CNBC, my heart is Democratic, but my brain is kind of Republican. The world's changed a lot since 2019. I wonder what you were thinking right now.
I'm kind of the same place. And I think we are our brother's keeper. We take care of ourselves, and we do community branches, and I want my employees to feel great, and I want customers to be happy. And I just think we need rational policy, really rational policy. And a lot of that policy is not Democrat or Republican. Getting proper infrastructure built is not Democrat or Republican. We should all acknowledge that inner city schools don't work particularly well in a lot of areas. Half the kids don't graduate. That's not Democratic or Republican. That's acknowledging the problem and then talking about solutions. Healthcare, we have the best in the world. Hell, I'm a beneficiary of it. But we also have some of the worst. It costs almost 20% of GDP, 50 million people uninsured, huge obesity, high blood pressure, a lot of things which are fixable. And I can go on and on and on. We need good policy. Good, and no policy is sometimes bad policy.
You referenced you're the beneficiary of the health system. You had this near-death experience.
Yeah.
How has that changed how you view your work right now? And I wonder if it's changed whether you have any desire to enter government.
No, I don't play golf. So I still love what I do. I love helping people. I love the people here. I'm so proud of them sometimes, and so it hasn't changed my view. I want to do things. I'm always going to do something. I'm not going to go smell the flowers and stuff like that. I'm not sure I'm suited for government. I want to help my country. I'll do anything I can to help my country.
And it sounds like you've got a lot of ideas to do that.
And we have a lot of ideas, yeah.